Well, we made it back from the wedding, all safe and sound, maybe a bit tuckered out, but I'll tell you, it was a great shoot all day today. In the meantime, the guy's been carrying all the gear back in. I've been loading up a couple of images here. I'd like to just discuss a couple of the key points that happened during the whole day here, and just to touch on a couple of the different topics, a couple of the challenges that we encountered in today's shoot. In our first image, we got over to the bride's home. The sun was going in and out behind the beautiful, it was a beautiful day. We had the white puffy clouds, but the sun was going in and out of those clouds. So I wanted to get a photograph of the bride in front of this little garden area that her mom and dad had put in. But the challenge was the sun going in and out and how it was lighting up the background for me and everything. But anyway, it worked out just fine. We got a couple nice photographs of she and her mom and dad's garden. So typically I'm going to be in I'm going to use my long lens, and the lens that I chose to use in this case here was a 70 to 300 millimeter lens, and it was racked out to about 185 millimeters. I'm using it, I would have preferred it to be a little wider aperture. I'm shooting it at f8 here because of the intensity of the afternoon sun. So f8 gave me a little bit more depth of field than I wanted, and you'll see that I really prefer shooting that lens at 5.6. But you know what, in our bright sun, I'm at ISO 200. F8 gave me what I needed. You also see the light coming in from the left-hand side. That would be Mark's light coming in there. And his light is coming in because of the intensity of the day. He was not able to shoot through the umbrella. We had to take the umbrella off, or this umbrella off, and that gives us 2 more stops of raw light hitting the bride. But it does give me the direction of light that I wanted in this particular photograph. Another thing is, too, this is a little Lightroom trick. If you get in this kind of a situation, you see the green leaves going a little bit hot for you, you can actually use a green channel in the Lightroom here and just drag the luminance down, and that'll darken those greens down a little bit for you, too. Just a little trick for the next Lightroom exercise you might be doing. The next image we did was when the bride's maid of honor, not a maid of honor, but the little flower girl came out, and I just asked her to join the bride. And I just bring her right in next to the bride, just to lean in. I always like the bride's arm just around the little girl's shoulder, and just bringing them together. In this photograph, the sun is out just a bit more. And again, I use the luminosity slider, the green channel in Lightroom, just to darken it down just a bit too. Again, because of the contrast of these situations, Lightroom is something that does kind of ride shotgun for me when I'm trying to really get really great images for my clients. I generally hit the vibrancy slider just a teeny bit. I generally hit the fill light slider just a bit. And again, if I've got some bright things in the background, I try to darken them down with the luminosity slider, whatever color channel I'm working in. But I think we got a nice image here. I think it's kind of fun to play with. Our next stop was then going over to Prospect Point, the area that overlooked the entire Ohio River Valley. And I love this photograph I have up here on screen. You actually see the nice classic S curve of the Ohio River behind the bride and groom, and she's just left of it as we're looking at this image. Look at the beautiful clouds, but also notice how I have the opening in the clouds kind of leading right down to her. So she's flanked by the clouds on the left and on the right, but the opening of the sky helps draw viewers' attention right to her. Also to the right, you'll see Mark's flash entering into the photograph. Well, why? You're thinking, why is he so close? Back him up. Well, because of my taking aperture here at f22 at a 250th of a second, well, that's why it was so close, because I needed that f22 aperture to darken that sky down so much. And you might be thinking, okay, Zeiser had you pull it off at a 250th of a second if you're shooting a Canon 5D Mark II. Well, I cheated the sync just a bit, and we actually covered that in one of the earlier Kelby training videos. The 5D Mark II's native sync speed is a 200th of a second. At a 250th, what does that mean? It just means that the left side of the photograph isn't affected by the flash. But as you look at the image here, who cares? You know, the flash is only affecting the bride, so if we don't get any light on the sky and the clouds behind, I really don't care. So cheating the sync basically gives me another option of darkening that sky down just a bit. So at 250th of a second at f22, got that sky pretty darn nice for me. Bring in Mark's light in from the right-hand side, gave me the direction on her face. You're going to say, okay, what are you going to do about that? The strobe light coming in. Whenever I bring my assistant's flash into the image area, I always say, make your assistant be in a Photoshoppable part of the image area. This is a simple, quick patch tool correction in Photoshop. piece of cake to take care of. So keep that in mind when you're shooting. And I'm thinking all the time, okay, can I get the assistant? Can I get the gear in the shot? Does it improve the photograph? Will it richen up the sky? Will it darken the sky? And if I think I can do that fairly easily, then again, as you saw when we were shooting, you had Mark holding the pole right out, getting it close to the bride's face, because I needed that shorter distance, so I had hotter light on her, so I could use smaller apertures and faster shutter speeds to darken the sky. Anyway, there's all that. That's all discussed in some earlier Kelby training videos, but you still see the result here on the job. You know, on the other Kelby training videos, I kind of get to talk it through and everything else. But, you know, today, or yesterday now, since it's after midnight, we had to work very, very quickly. And all the stuff that we talked about in earlier training videos actually comes into play here on the shoot of the wedding day. Let's take a look at our next image. After we left Prospect Point, we headed down to Twin Oaks to get some photographs of the wedding party and moms and dads and family members there before we actually headed up to church. The thing is that the service started at 6 o'clock. It was a full Catholic service. It was going to go to about 7 o'clock. There were receiving lines. They were blowing the bubbles, not so much receiving lines, but still blowing the bubbles and everything. We know that took us to about 7:20 or so. Well, the reception started at 8 o'clock. Now, why would I put myself in a time constraint of saying, okay, I've got to get all the wedding party members photographed, I have to get mom and dad's photographed, I have to get the bride and groom photographed in that 30-minute stretch. I said this earlier on, that if I can get my brides and grooms hopefully to see each other beforehand, and we can schedule some times throughout the day to really take advantage of the beautiful time of the day, the beautiful weather, everybody not being late for anything, as we here at Twin Oaks, you know, an hour and a half before the wedding, it really lets us put together a wonderful series of images for our clients. My gosh, we ended up shooting about 3,000 images today, but you know what, we get to edit those down, and don't you think that starting with 3,000, with what we're looking at just this brief little bit right here, it's going to edit down into a super duper tight, wonderful collection of images for my clients. But anyway, getting back to this, it's because of how we put some of the timing into the day as well. So we had about an hour to spend down Twin Oaks. We found a location. If you remember, I talked about it earlier today, looking for a spot that would go out of focus, because I'm shooting with what? I'm shooting with my 70 to 300 millimeter lens. This time, I'm sitting at 5.6, so that's a wide enough open aperture that throws the trees in the background well out of focus. And when you look at this image, you can see the whole wedding party, not the wedding party, but the bride's family, nice and sharp focus, and all the trees in the background in soft focus. So the viewer's eyes, our eyes, go right to that image when we're looking at them. It goes right to their faces. So I prefer to be shooting at about a 5.6 aperture if I'm using that 70 to 300 millimeter lens. It was funny as we were down there, I don't know if it's showing up in the video, but we were right in front of the number 1 tee, and the golfers were trying to wait for us, and we were trying to wait for them. We were kind of, there's a couple golfers' heads in a couple of these photographs I know, looking at them as I was just kind of previewing them here. But you know, that all comes with a wedding day shoot. You know, you can't stop what's going on around. You have to kind of work within that whole scenario. So, you know, kind of work together. They helped us out. We helped them out. They got their shots and everything. And we got some great shots ourselves of the whole wedding party. So our next image I want to look at is, as we were down at Twin Oaks, they had that beautiful porch surrounding the building. And I thought, man, we got some pretty light coming in here. And I thought I'd just have the bride just kind of stand right by the pillars. Now, whenever I have my subjects next to the pillars, I'm going to position my camera to such a position that the pillars all overlap each other. As you look at this image, notice that you don't see any space between the pillars. I'm once again with my long 70 to 300 millimeter lens. I'm shooting it at 5.6. I'm at ISO 200 here, and I'm shooting this at 100th at 5.6. Image stabilized lets me hand hold it even at 100th of a second. It's racked out to a 240th of a second, which is letting those pillars in the background just recede out of the image and actually soften the focus on them as they get further and further away from the shot. Now, if you've watched any of my other Kelby training videos, I'm always talking about a loop lighting pattern and how it needs to be on the subject's face and so forth. When I'm doing these kinds of images, it's mostly just a soft image of the bride and the groom, and I was a little bit less worried about orienting her head towards the light to give me the loop lighting pattern. I thought if I could just put the proper exposure on her face, which means I had to put more exposure on her face, what happens to the pillars in the background? They really lighten up quite nicely and give me what I consider what we call a nice high key image here. So I think it's a pretty photograph of the bride just on the porch area. We did a couple more, as you've seen, of the bride coming in with the groom and doing another series of images of them as well. Moving on then, if you remember, we rushed up to church, and I was kind of giggling in the car because I looked at my watch and it said about I think it was 6:35. I knew we had 25 minutes to get up to church, which was about 15 minutes, 17 minutes away. But you know what? When you're used to doing this, wedding photography, you know you got a little bit of time to move from one place to the other. You know everything's going to be okay. You know the girls are up there getting ready. You just hope you don't get a flat tire or get stuck behind a wreck or whatever on the way. But we knew we were good. We were expressway most of the way, and we came skidding in about 10 minutes beforehand. Nicholas and Mark grabbed the gear. I went immediately to the church to see what the lay of the land was there and also to introduce myself to Father. You know, one thing to eliminate a lot of the problems, and I'll tell you, photographers out there these days are ticking off priests, ministers, and rabbis because they don't understand the proper protocol when they are photographing a wedding. Folks, you have to remember, it is the bride and groom's day. It is not your day to be doing your thing for their wedding. It is their day for you to be doing your thing in conjunction with their wedding day. And your thing should never, ever step on the toes of church protocol or bride and groom protocol either. So keep that in mind when you're shooting a wedding. It's about doing the job for them. It's how you honor the service. It's how you honor your customer. It's how you honor your profession as well. So anyway, I zipped up into the church, went into the back, met the priest, introduced myself. Hadn't really worked with him before, so I wanted him to get to know me a little bit and so forth, and me to know him. Let him know right off the bat that there would be no flash during the service. Doesn't need to be. My gosh, folks, we're working with these high ISO cameras. We're working with these long lenses. Why in the world do we need to be firing off flash during different parts of the service like ring exchange, all that other business? We just don't need to do that. I assured Father that I would be in the back of the church for about all the exposures, with the exception of the processional with the bride and her dad walking up the aisle, and also with the recessional with everybody coming back up the aisle. I ask his permission. In the Catholic service, they have what's called the offertory reception, or offertory procession, where they have special family members grab the wine and the bread from the back of the church, and they process up the center aisle. And that's handed off to the priest, who hands it off to the server, and that becomes what they're going to proceed with the whole church service. So I asked him if I could get over into the side aisle, shoot in there, no flash. And I was specific to say to him, Father, don't worry, no flash is going off. I'll just have my long lenses. You won't even know I'm on the sidelines over there. He said, hey, that's fine, no problem at all. We also asked for permission to have Nicholas on the other side to be shooting with long lenses, 70 to 200 millimeter lens, and also to have some of the video done as well from over there, so you guys and girls could get a good view of what was going on. Anyway, Father was cool with everything. We were cool. He knows that I wasn't going to be using flash. He also knows that I would be very, very discreet throughout the whole day. He was a happy camper with everything, and I was a happy camper. And we really owe the priests, ministers, and rabbis in our profession, in the wedding profession, our respect. Again, it's a place of worship, folks, and in a place of worship, we owe that place of worship respect as well. And we're honoring not just the service and the bride and groom and the ceremony, we're honoring the faith, the house of faith that we happen to be in too. I think more photographers need to understand that in our profession because, as I said, there's more priests, ministers, and rabbis kind of getting a little bit upset with some of the shooters out there. So please, please, please cover that before you start shooting that wedding. Know what the house rules are. Let the priests, ministers, and rabbis know that you're going to respect those house rules, and everything will be better for everybody. Anyway, moving on to our next photograph. Up at the church. One thing I like to do is I love to be in the back of the church and zoom in. And I mentioned earlier on that I like playing around with that 18 to 200 millimeter lens. Man, oh man, just you zoom that sucker in with a 50D. What do you have? You have 1.6 times 200 millimeters. What do you got? You got like almost 400, or you got a 300 millimeter lens, just about 320 millimeters, if that's the proper math. That's a long optic to be standing in the back of the church. The other thing I do too on my camera, and we can talk about this maybe about a future Kelby media or Kelby training video, is one thing is my cameras have a special custom settings. I think the 5D has 3 of them. The 50D has 2 custom settings. Those custom settings, C1 basically, is set up for 1600 ISO, and it's also set up for program mode. I call it P for professional, and it's also set up for 2800 Kelvin color balance. It's also set up for JPEG. So I'm going to turn it to the C1 mode, and right away all my settings are set. I can zoom in close and take a look at this image right here. It's 1600 ISO at f2.8. I'm getting 160th of a second at 1600 ISO. I think this is looking pretty darn good. It's the bride and groom exchanging the rings, and I think it's these kinds of photographs that just tell the story. when I'm in the back of the church, I'm always trying to get the bride and groom exchanging the rings. I want to see the ring go under the finger. I want to see the bride holding the groom's hand and the groom holding the bride's hand when we take these images. It's nice and tight. You get everything looking good. It's good to go. And then, of course, what's one of the last things we want to get, the last things that happen during the service? Priest, minister, or rabbi announces everybody as husband and wife. The bride and groom, you may now kiss the bride, and of course that happens. Well, I'm in the back of the church, again, with my 18 to 200 millimeter lens. Check out the specs on it. I'm at 3200. That's my C2 setting on my 50D, which is really maxed out on the ISO. It's JPEG mode. I needed to mention that as well because we are just going click, click, click. As they're approaching, turning, kissing, I'm going click, click, click. I got a dozen or so photographs of them doing that. Well, even though I'm at an 80th of a second, but remember I'm at like 320 millimeters, there's going to be some camera shake from me, possibly, and also a little bit of motion blur from the couple. But at an 80th of a second, once I call it pause points. As they move towards each other, there's motion, but when they touch and kiss, that's a pause point, and that pause point, even at an 80th of a second, will actually freeze the action pretty well. And even if you zoom up on this image, they are really, really nice and sharp in this image. So 3200, yes, I know I'm pushing a high ISO. I know I'm pushing some noise issues in it. But with all the noise pieces of software out there, I like Nix Define 2. I mean, that sucks up the noise pretty well in these images. And again, how big is it going to be in a wedding album? Maybe a 5x7. You're not going to see it at all. But for me, it's still about getting this image for the story for the bride and groom. So anyway, we got that one. Now, one thing that happened is we had nice photographs at the bride's home with she and her girls. We went down to Prospect Point. We got a couple photographs of the whole wedding party. We went down to Twin Oaks. We got the rest of the wedding party again and family members and some more of the bride and groom. But what I wanted to do was kind of capture a couple photographs of Blessed Sacrament, them and Blessed Sacrament in the church where they were married, because I think it's nice to kind of anchor that in the story that we're telling. Do I need to photograph moms and dads there again? No. Do I need to photograph the whole wedding party there again? No. They're already covered. I let them know, hey, head out to the limo, get the air conditioning started, just start relaxing. We'll be out there in about another 5 minutes. So the other 5 minutes, I'm going to move through what I call just some signature images, which would be, of course, the bride and groom in front of the altar. I would do one of the bride, as we see right here, from the back, seeing the back of her gown. Mark, my assistant, is bringing the light in through this umbrella, giving us pretty light right on her face. And then I would just drag the shutter, which means slows it down just enough to pick up some of the ambient light. Take a look at this image. It's at ISO 800. I'm shooting with my 5D Mark II 24-105 millimeter lens on it, handheld at a 30th of a second. Image stabilized, man, that's like plenty fast to be sure we got a nice sharp image. You can zoom in on this, it'll be tack sharp. But it's a great image of just the bride within her church. I would bring the groom in and we might do a couple other photographs of the both of them in the aisles, maybe a photograph that features him, one of them backlit, whatever. I mean, I'm zipping through these photographs in about 6 or 7 or 8 minutes and we're good to go. We're outside the church, they're getting in the limo, and we're on our way down to back to Twin Oaks for the wedding reception. We get down there, it's getting pretty darn close. The the reception was going to start at around 8 o'clock. We scoot in there about 7:45, maybe 10 of 8. Wedding party's getting out of the limo. The Twin Oaks people, the coordinators are trying to get everybody lined up. The DJ's ready to get people lined up. And I asked the bride and groom, I talked to them about earlier on, I said, man, we'll be back down here when the sun is going to be setting. We might get a cool shot. I was ready to back off of that shot because I thought, you know what, we had cool things of the bride and groom already. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to intrude into the day. And I think it's sad, but too many photographers intrude themselves into the day. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox one more time, but it's not our show, it's their show. We need to know when to pull back. Anyway, I went up to the bride and I said, hey, Colleen, you know what, we can, I was going to get a photograph here, but I think we got everything we need. She said to me, she says, well, I think I'd like to get the sunset photograph. And we were getting some pretty color in the clouds in the sky. I said, come on down. I got a place where we can go. So we literally went over to the 10th tee at the golf course. The colors in the sky were just starting to develop nicely. And it's just a simple, quick photograph, just the both of them looking at each other. Mark, my assistant's behind them. The flash is on full blast. And I'm sitting here with, the 24-105 lens on the camera, sitting at ISO 50. Why? So I get that sky really darkened down. I'm at a 200th of a second at 5.6, and I got Mark pushing much light on the back of them as we possibly can. But we got a cool photograph here. Look at the colors of the sky. Look at the clouds coming in. Look how the clouds lead right on up to them. and it took us about 5 minutes to get a couple very cool photographs of them. The pose is not going to be complicated. It's going to be them looking at each other, a couple of those, then kissing each other, a couple of those, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer and get some half-length or some three-quarter-length images of them, and probably one of them looking back at me, a couple of them looking back at me with the sky behind them. Again, we clicked through those images super-duper quickly. We got everything we needed. I showed them to the bride, and she loved what she was seeing. So anyway, we got that done. We're good to go. We caught up with the coordinator up at Twin Oaks Country Club. Everybody's getting lined up. We jumped on in, gear ready in hand. Nicholas was covering a couple of things peripheral for me while I'm out here, so we had the whole coverage pretty well covered, and then in we went and let the party begin. Now, once we got inside, my gosh, we had 4 hours of reception coverage to take care of. We were photographing the tables. It's something I just do all the time. We got all of those. We kept track of all those, and you saw how we were doing that a little bit earlier on. But one of the other key things that I do is photographing the bride and the groom dancing. And again, one of my favorite photographs, I've been doing it forever, is the backlit bridal dance. Mark, one more time, is behind the subject, 12 feet behind, flashes 4 feet off the ground, pointing at their shoulder blades, and it gives me this nice rimming out effect of the couple. I'm not using a slower shutter speed because I really don't want any of the ambient light to come into the scene at all. Typically, I'm shooting at about 6.3 when I'm shooting my wedding candids, my wedding reception candids. You know what? I know I could go down to 5.6 if I'd like, but it's plenty of depth of field. Back in my film days when I was shooting in medium format Hasselblad, I shot everything at f8. Folks, you get more depth of field at 5.6 on your digital 35 cameras than we did in our medium format f8 lenses on our medium format cameras. Anyway, the point is, this is just a nice photograph of the bride and groom dancing, and I think it's many times, just a wrap-up photograph for the evening as well. You saw me play around with the pole cam, and we're actually pulling this off a little bit later in the evening, but we had enough people on the dance floor to kind of give you the effect of what it looks like. I still giggle every time I do this because, heck, you don't know if it's going to work, you don't know what's going to happen, but let's go ahead and take a look. And when I shoot with the pole cam, and we talked about this earlier today, but the camera's set on time exposure, so it gives me 10 seconds after I press the shutter to get the camera hanging over the crowd. It's on just a regular old monopod, fully extended. And as I said earlier, I don't know if you heard me with all the noise of the wedding reception going on, but I literally set the lens on manual, and I just dial in the focal length. I just go to infinity, back it back just a little bit more. When I hang it over the crowd, it's about 5, 6, 7 feet away. Everything's in focus with an 8mm fish, I have to tell you. I prefer using it on the 50D because I get that 1.6 magnification factor, and it fills up the image area just a bit more for me. If I'd done it on the 5D Mark II, I'd have a circle there. I just don't like the effect as much. I prefer it on the 50D or the 40D cameras. So anyway, what happened was I had the flash, a 580EX2 flash, pulled the wide-angle diffuser out, put that on the top because the fisheye is 180 degrees. The diffuser at least give me a light source. It give me I like to call it a cone of light that's substantially wider than what I would get without that being on there. Anyway, everything's set. The lens is on manual. I've got it focused about 6 or 7 feet away. Press the button. I'm mentally counting off to myself 1001, 1002. At about 1007, as I'm moving into the crowd, I say, hey, everybody, look up at the camera. And I signal to the camera as I'm making the motion then of lifting the camera up over their heads. They see it, waving to the camera, and about 2 seconds later, the thing goes off. We got a great photograph here. Not too many people in it, but it's fun. That's all that counts. You know, the more people, the merrier. If we got everybody out there in a circle dance, it just makes even a stronger photograph for our pole cam. But I like this one here. You'll see we got that shiny spot on the floor. That's just because it was a shiny dance floor. Again, quick patch tool in Photoshop makes that go away. But a fun photograph nevertheless, and I think it's a nice party photograph. I'll tell you, the next thing that we did was, remember those little mini LEDs that I showed in the beginning part of our video? And we had 4 of those, and because I was going to take the bride and groom outside along with 4 of the wedding party members, and they were going to use these LEDs to do a little bit of light painting. And I thought it came out great with what we got. Take a look at an image that you see up here on the screen. You know, the one guy is making the one groomsman, actually it's the bride's brother making the L, and then her sister-in-law making the O, and then her other sister-in-law making the V, and her brother-in-law making the E. So it really looks cool. There they are spelling out love. I had the camera at f/22 for that particular photograph, and it was on bulb, which means that I was holding the button down, the shutter was remaining open as they kept repeating their letters as they were going through the whole thing. After about 4 seconds, I cued Mark to say, hey, give me the flash. The flash was on full power. We're on f/22 on this particular photograph, and it's about a 5-second exposure is what the data is, the EXIF data is saying up here. So 5 seconds, f/22. I put him in front of an area that was kind of dark, because with a 5-second exposure, even at f/22, a lot of light's going to really kind of come into the whole scene right here. So and if you got too much light on the background, what's going to happen is the people moving, making the letters, are going to blur out. So you want them with a dark background behind them, and then when the light fires, it's going to freeze them in spot, and also tell them all to be paying attention and smiling when the flash goes off. Anyway, it makes a great wrap-up photograph for the bride and groom, probably the last photograph in their album, and it really, it's just a nice ender for the whole book. So, as you can see, we started out in the beautiful afternoon daylight, beautiful afternoon breezes and white puffy clouds and blue skies, moved through the whole day pretty well nonstop. Kind of an easy shoot today, I thought. You know, we were kind of running, we were moving pretty quickly and everything, but you know, not over the top. But we were busy the whole time. I like to jokingly say we know how hard a wedding is when we get our first Coke break or first water break. If it's at 10:30 at night, pretty tough day. I think we got our first water break here somewhere around 7:30, which means that was a pretty easy day. So anyway, enough said on that. I thought the bride and groom got a great coverage, from photographs beforehand to photographs outdoors to photographs indoors to special photographs down at the reception venue to a pretty cool sunset going on, wrapping it up with the light painting love image. I think they'll be thrilled with the images. We took about 3,000. I'm going to edit that down to about 1,200 or so. I think they're going to love what they see. So that's what it's like shooting a wedding if you hang out with me on a Saturday. Lots of fun, lots of excitement, a lot of stuff going on to capture all the images. And it's always about capturing that variety of images for our clients as well, which I certainly think we did today. It's also about knowing your gear. It's about knowing and anticipating what's going to be happening. It's also about, if you have assistants working with you, that they know what they're up to and that you can direct them as quickly as possible. I happen to be a guy who happens to prefer working with assistants because it lets my shooting go that much more quickly. We typically press that camera button about once every 9 or 10 seconds when we're shooting, and shooting images that often means that we're trying to capture everything happening on the day. So all of us being a pretty well-oiled team makes the shoot come off so that we get a fabulous set of images for our clients. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation today. Like I said, first time ever on Kelby Media Training, or probably anywhere, to show you just what it's like to go photograph in a wedding with myself or a lot of other photographers out there. But I hope you enjoyed the ride today. Take a review of the tape, pick up some of the areas that you might think you want to review and so forth, but I think there's a lot of good content in this video here, and I think as you watch it, I think it'll really give you some insights and what a typical wedding, how a typical wedding's photographed, and I hope it'll help you in your next wedding too. So hey everybody, thanks a lot for watching and hanging in there for the day, and maybe I'll see you at your next wedding. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye now.